Welcome to the Daily Plunge. We're in Galatians chapter 5, verses 16 through 24. Now, throughout this chapter, Paul has been saying that we have been freed from sin and from the power of the law through the work of Christ. So he picks up in verse 16. So I say, walk by the Spirit, live by the Spirit, which means that you are not to live by the natural efforts of your own life, by, human wisdom, by the power of the flesh. And he says, do not gratify the desires of the flesh, which is also, the law. The law is that whole effort to live out of yourself, but rather that the work of the flesh, the work of the law, is contrary to the Spirit. In verse 18, he says, if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. If you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the power of the flesh. And then he goes on in verse 19. He says the acts, the works of the flesh are obvious. I don't know. Are they obvious? I don't know if they're obvious to a sinful world. He talks about sexual immorality and debauchery and drunkenness and orgies, and you may say, yeah, I don't do that. But let's look at the other parts of the list. How about idolatry? If you worship anything more than God, you might be an idolater. I mean, whether it's your car, your possessions, your job, if your spouse, your kids, if you worship them more than God, you might be an idolater. What about discord, jealousy? Have any of that? Does that ring a bell? What about fits of rage? You think about road rage? There you go. There's an act of the flesh. He also talks about selfish ambition and envy. So I think it hits all of us. And then he goes to verse 1. He says, I warn you, that those who live like this, those who live out of the power of the flesh cannot inherit the kingdom of God, because you cannot inherit what you think you can earn or work for. Now, verse 22, he picks up and he talks about the fruits of the Spirit. And the fruits are the result of living in the Spirit. And the first one is love, and the word is agape. And this is a no matter what, self-sacrificing kind of love. And then you have joy, which is gladness or rejoicing that comes out of faith. You have peace and harmony, which again begins with your relationship with God. Patience or forbearance, long-suffering might be another way of looking at that. Kindness, a better translation might be benevolence, that in which you do something that is kind, not expecting to get something back. Right? It's not a quid pro quo. Goodness or generosity, like the goodness of God. Faithfulness, actually the Greek word there is pistis, which is faith, which again turns us back to a relationship of trust. You have the fruit of the Spirit is a relationship of trust with God. Gentleness or humility, humble like Christ, and self-discipline, because, if you are defined by the Spirit, you will not be defined by the flesh. And so in all of these, Paul is encouraging us not to live by the law of this life, but to live by the power and faith of the Spirit and by our faith. Well, thanks, friends. Have a blessed day.